Does this feel like, remember that Saturday Night Live sketch with Alec Baldwin? With their sweaty balls? It sort of feels, yeah, so, Shelley?
Yeah?
Just wanted to say it's really nice to have you here, Shelley.
Nice to be.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. So,
Okay.
Shelley and I are good friends. I was very blessed to have an old studio in Los Angeles, I don't know, I got out of it a few years ago, but I had it for about 15 or 20 years, and one of our clients was Jack Douglas. And Jack introduced me to Shelley. Now, growing up in England, and I know if you've ever watched any of my videos, you probably know this little bit of spiel, and I'm sure every one of you has this experience. You bought records, CDs, vinyl, whatever it was, and, you open it up and you look at the credits. So I'm growing up in this little village in England, and I'm buying Damn the Torpedoes, making movies. Actually, I should just say making movies like 10 times. And poor old Shelley, I've asked him the same questions over and over again about that record. Any of you Dire Straits fans, especially that period? I mean, phenomenal sounding album. And combined with some of the best songs ever. I mean, Romeo and Juliet. I actually can tear up thinking about hearing that as a kid. My first girl I ever had a crush on. Sorry, my wife's over there. I was probably 13 when that came out. I mean, showing my age. I mean, I was 6. No, I was probably 13 when that came out. And I remember...
Showing my age.
Well, you were 15 when you made it.
No, yeah.
Anyway, to say that Shelley needs no introduction is kind of an understatement. I think... I can use all those cliches, the unsung hero, But in this day and age that we live in, where, I don't want to be negative, but music is sometimes seen as quite disposable. There's really good quality music out there. There's so much great stuff, but it's like, comes at us at a million miles an hour. And all of you, if you've watched any of my videos, may find out there's a little bit of a sort of theme of mine. And my theme is... I love the Beatles. Everybody does. I love Zeppelin. I love all of the classic music that we all consider to be the greatest music of all time. But my personal heavily biased opinion, and it's a bias, is that there was a golden period of music, mid-70s to like mid-80s. And I have a lot of people, JJP and I were talking about this, where everything came together. The songwriting was unbelievable because the Beatles were still a recent thing. The production techniques were phenomenal. The tape machines were like amazing. SSLs just came in. We had NES, we had APIs. We had musicianship was still valued. People really wanted to be great players. They wanted to be great songwriters. They wanted everything. And just this period, like you pick a generic album from like 78 or 79, 80. If it was in the top 40, go back and listen to it. Unbelievable. Just like everything was incredible. And now, unfortunately, we get the top 40, and regardless of genre, I'm not making this about particular genres, you don't see that consistency anymore. And it's a little unfortunate, but we're blessed because we're sitting here with you, and you made so many of those records.
Wow.
That was a very long build-up.
No, it's awesome. I'm humbled.
So what I want to do is, because you can go and watch all of the interviews that I've done with Shelley. I think we've done 4 or 5. What I would like to be able to do is spend a little bit of a time and maybe asking him a couple of questions about some records, but I want you all to feel free, if you know his discography, to ask some questions, because I know if I was sitting in the audience, I'd be like, well, I really like, that album you did, like Roy Buchanan album, or whatever it is, So if anything comes up any time, I'm going to be very cognizant. And if you want to stick a hand up and ask a question, even while I'm waffling on, please do, because I understand that a lot of this information is available, but there might be one question that you really want to know. Anyway, so Shelley.
Yes, Warren.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, no. You'll have to tell me about myself. I can't talk about myself.
Well, by the time you got to make that kind of period, when we're talking like mid-late 70s, where you had a really amazing run of some of the best-selling records. When you're making Tom Petty, you're making Damn the Torpedoes. For those of you that don't know that album, go and check it out. I asked Bob Clearmountain this the other day, because he also is right there at that period, being one of the first mixers one of the first actual mixers. Was there any kind of awareness of because for Bobby, he said it was like he came from an R&B pop background, very heavily R&B funk, and he was making chic records and stuff like that. And then the Stones wanted to be current, so they're like, we need to get somebody who does R&B and pop, and they brought him in. I suppose it's a very vague question, but was there an awareness of just how incredible those times were for you?
Yes, there was. We didn't always know if what we were working on was a hit record or a hit song. But we knew that people could play their own music and sing their own music, and there were no boxes to put them in tune. And these people that I worked with and that had success and didn't have success, they were amazing. I mean, when you hear some of this music, like what you're talking about, the albums you're talking about, come out of the speakers in a studio, it's like, it takes you over like, I wish you all could have been there. It's remarkable. And my job as a mixer is to know my place. I'm not the producer, I'm not the songwriter, I'm not the record label. But my job is to capture that artist, that group, that song, the essence of what they're trying to do, and get what's in the producer's head and the writer's head and the lead singer's head and the record label's head to come out of those speakers. And so my awareness was always, does it feel good? Is what I'm doing capturing what's really happening? So I would go out in the room, listen to what they were doing. Do I have that inside? Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. I would make whatever corrections I had to make to capture what they were doing. And if I were mixing, usually people handed me tapes and said, Shelly, we're killing each other. Take these 2 reels of 24-track tapes and mix this thing for us. And I'd say, only if you're going to come to the session, because many mixers don't want the client there because you come to them for a certain thing and they want to give you that thing without interruption or distraction. I always wanted the client there because I felt that the client, whether it's the artist or whether it's the producer, whoever it might be, had a better feel for who the group is than I do. But I had a unique feel because I was new to the situation and I would reach for things that other people normally wouldn't reach for. So together, we would make these records. And sometimes they were horrified. I'd say to them, all right, you're going to put your hands on the vocal faders. What? I'm going to ride the drums, I'm going to ride the rhythm sections, and the lead vocal. You grab the backgrounds. Because as a mixer, you can put those backgrounds, just as an example, I could put those backgrounds, you could put those backgrounds at any level, but it dramatically changes the presentation of the song. And that's true of any instrument, but many times the vocals do this. And I would be riding around, and there was no automation, I would be riding around their background vocals. So a lot of times the producers would just shove those backgrounds up really loud, and I would have never thought of the group sounding that way. And together we made really good records, you know. The board was sweaty. That's how I knew we were working hard and in the right direction. But each time that tape played, you had to move those faders and go back to your start marks and go to wherever you did. And it was really, to answer your question, it was really about feel rather than the technology. The technology always had to be transparent and not get in the way. No matter how long I wanted to work on the drum sound, let's say, at some point it has to be music.
The thing that keeps going through my mind is how all of these great records, all this great music that we love and we all consider to be timeless and we're always name checking, was all about collaboration. So much greater. One of the freedoms in what we have now with all of this gear is that we can do so much. And one of the constraints is we can do so much. Because it used to be, I always think of Motown as a great example. If you look at a Motown record, you had a producer, which was, whoever that may have been, was essentially almost like a administrative, role, organizational role that would go, okay, here's the drummer that's going to play, here's the bass player, here's the guitarist, here's the string arranger, this is the orchestra, this is the brass section, these guys, girls wrote the song, these guys and girls are going to sing on it. And they put together, I don't know, maybe on a classic Motown track, maybe 40 people, if you put an orchestra in there or something, were involved in creating this music. And so you had like, oh, James Jameson's going to play bass. One of the greatest bass players that ever lived is going to play bass. And then this guy's going to play drums, and this girl's going to do this. And now we're in this situation where it's like us with our setup. And probably, honestly, let's be honest, 90% of the time, one person, the singer. And maybe we're hiring a musician to come in if we can't play the part. But we have MIDI, and we have the ability to edit ourselves in time. All of this is absolutely wonderful. And it's not that this isn't great advancements in technology, but we're selling ourselves short. So one of the things I'm thinking when you're describing this collaborative process, and this is a question for all of us, is like, how do we bring this back? If we want to make this music that isn't just like, oh, it sounds really good on the radio today, and I love that laser effect and this downbeat, and that was great, and it was huge, and it was hit. But then we start thinking, well, a year later, it's so disposable. We need to do that. We need to figure out how can we bring not just our own brains into it. Shelly just gave us this example of guys and girls on faders. Like, ride your bass, you ride your vocal, you do something. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you? It's a big question. I don't know what that is.
Well, one of the things that would happen in the session is the bass player would want his bass louder, the drummer would want his drums louder, and all the musicians would want everything louder. So I would give the bass player the drums, and I would give the singer the guitars, and they'd start pulling stuff down so they could hear themselves instead of pushing it off the end. There's a song called Uptown Funk that's a really good example of a production and a song and a sound and a feel that got it right. There aren't enough, and I can only listen. All I have is my opinion. That's all I got, and it's my opinion that there's not enough great stuff, and there could be more, because guys that come from my background apply what we've learned during those years where there were no boxes, you had to invent your own sounds, and apply it to now. And it makes a great combination, putting analog and digital together, or the thinking about analog and the using of digital, which is a great medium, and putting it together and trying to capture the essence of who you're working with. The issue is, no matter what you read, and again, this is my opinion, but no matter what you read, what comes into digital and plays back is not, what comes in is not the same as what's played back. There's a difference. If you believe there's no difference, I think you won't make as good a record. I still call them records, but as good a finished product. But if you believe there are shortcomings to digital and you make adjustments for those shortcomings, you can make a great record.
So I feel like, anybody have a question? Good.
Let's follow through. Shelly, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Last week, I went to see Rick Wakeman, keyboard player from Yes. And he's doing a solo piano tour. So instead of playing with 18 keyboards around him, it's one grand piano, and he's talking a lot about his time with David Bowie. So Bowie sits him down, says, "Here's my song. It's all about Mars." And then Rick says, "How would you like me to play it?" He goes, "You know." No. How would you like me to play it? He goes, "You know." What he was basically saying was Bowie surrounded himself with people that were good and said, "Do your thing." And we just did a session this whole summer on a Halloween album, similar thing. Anthony, you're on guitar. Do your thing with acoustic. So that's what we found is the best of the world right now, because everything can be fixed electronically or adjusted. But when you got those other musicians to each, that you could trust, there was some new magic along with the technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and no, I completely get it. When Jimmy Iovine and myself were making records together, it was very similar to that. I get that.
I feel like I'm sure everybody knows the 10,000 hours. Everybody knows Outliers and those principles. But one of the things I love, theme in those books is like to look at things that are great, admit that we're never going to go back to those days. It's just not going to happen. There's not going to be another $500,000 budget on a baby band. That's what it used to be like. I can tell you, in the 90s, when I first started getting record deals as an artist, we get signed for $500,000 and be like our first record. We hadn't sold a single thing. We'd played in front of 8 people, and you got signed. And they gave most of that money to a producer, an engineer, and a studio, and you went in and made an album. And it took 6 weeks to 3 months to make an album. That isn't going to happen again. It might happen for, megastars, but for baby bands, it's not going to happen. They're not going to get that. So we have to look at all these things and say, like an Outliers position, and go, okay, what are the advantages? One thing I will say for those of you here that use some of the newer DAWs, what I do like about things like Ableton and FL Studio and stuff is the fact that it does there's Larry Crane from Tape Op and Lenny's bent making faces at me. What I do like about that is it also gives you as producers and engineers that level of creativity as well. And don't get me wrong, I like Pro Tools, I like all the other ones, but I do like that kind of level of experimentation that it can now give us, which is outside of the fixing. It's more of the twisting, and I like that. And I think that's a good tool for lots of people I see use. But the question is like, and that's just coming up here, is like, how can we create those environments ourselves? How can we make albums and create an atmosphere where people can be how can we inspire them, to be creative and not just make it about record and fix and record and fix and record and fix? And I think that's something that we all need to own. It's like, as producers, engineers, mixers, songwriters, whatever, musicians, think that way, because it's great. Uptown Funk, has anybody read about how long that took to make that one song? Mark Ronson talked about it. It took a year. They spent 1 year making that song. Starting, stopping, retracking, whatever. That's great. But how many times, if you're not Bruno Mars, how many times in this world are you going to be able to spend like $200,000 on studio time? Is that going to happen to anybody in this room? I make some big records. I don't have a $200,000 budget to make a song, but Bruno Mars does, and Mark Ronson does. But they're in a tiny echelon. Even most pop stars don't get that kind of budget. So we have to figure out how we're going to create those things. And I think that's a big discussion.
Well, first you have to believe that it's lacking. If people don't believe that you have a point, nothing's going to happen. But I know you have a point, and I know it's valid. And what we were saying just a few minutes ago, you take guys like Jimmy Iovine and Bob Ezrin and other successful producers like them, they surrounded themselves with people who brought ideas to the session. Excuse me. And those people brought ideas, and many of those ideas were used. And it was about this, nobody ever makes a record by themselves. It's about this creative thing that goes on amongst people, and this thinking amongst people. And even though the producer's flying the kite and he's making the final decisions, there's some really good ideas to work with. Trying to think of some examples that You know, Edge of 17, when Waddy Wachtel played that part on the guitar, he played that for probably 30 takes. Never got tired, and it was always in time. I mean, when people play like that, you can make some terrific records, you know. And I think if people feel that something's lacking in look, there are some great records. I don't want to sound like the old days are better than the new days. I don't want to sound like that at all. But the focus seems to be about technology now. Technology needs to be transparent no matter what you're using, and it needs to be about capturing the band you're working with. Otherwise, you're doing a disservice to the producer, to the band, to yourself, why they came to work with you. That's my thought.
No, I think everybody agrees really on where we're at. You know, musically, it's just that there's also this realization is that we just don't have those budgets, and we want to be able to make those records. So I think the question for me is like, how do we create those ourselves? I think as individual producers and engineers, studio owners, home studio owners, think about what the advantages were when Shelly was making some of those amazing records, which are still considered to be like the greatest records ever made. All the advantages or the realities that you had, how can we ourselves do that? I think having like collectives, having, you know, finding people in your local area, other musicians, other engineers and producers to collaborate with, not getting like so insular and making it like, you know, I've got my thing, I've got my sound or whatever. That's great, but I think we need to cultivate, you know, especially if you're a local studio owner. If you have a little studio in your town, bring in as many people as you can. You know, find ways to work with others, grow your network. First of all, it will really help you in business anyway, because you'll find more work. But I think the quality of the music will grow dramatically from it. Anyway, I'm waffling a lot. Is there any questions for Shelly?
For Shelly, what would you say is the proudest work you've ever mixed or recorded on?
Anything that I got to the finish line on. Any project that finished. All kidding aside, you know, it's hard to say. I got to work with John Lennon on like 3 albums. I worked on Imagine with him, and I'm in the room with Phil Spector, and everybody's at attention, you know, and you're hoping the tape machine doesn't stop running or eat the tape. And you know, it was a remarkable thing. But who's to say that that's any less than Tom Petty or Bob Seger or Stevie Nicks or Dire Straits? You know. Who's to say that they're any less than that? It's like everything that I worked on, I feel really proud to be a part of, because I worked hard on it, and I tried my best to satisfy the producer and the writers and the artists, and satisfy myself and have my own personality in there, and come out with something that was really a good finished product. It didn't have to be successful, and a lot of stuff I couldn't listen to for 6 months after it was done. We had worked on it so much and so intently, it becomes your life. Some albums took a few weeks. Chick Corea, I did some albums with Chick Corea. He does an album in 3 weeks, you know. The next one I did with him, he took 2 months. I've done albums that took 9 months. So it's really, I'm sorry I can't give you a definitive artist, but I've worked with some amazingly talented people. And
I think I asked you that exact same question, and I remember after the camera stopped, you were like, probably John Lennon.
Yeah, he's a Beatle. I mean, you know, I think John was separate from everybody else in some way. I don't know how to describe it, but working with John, he was very comfortable working with young guys as engineers, and I was fortunate enough to work with him.
Any other questions for Shelly? microphone is winging its way over.
Hey guys. So I'm a guitar player. I love the guitar dominant sound of like a Dire Straits or an Aerosmith or like a Van Halen. The new sound is less guitar, more rhythm heavy, more vocal heavy. So my question is, where do you see guitar moving forward? What's the way to incorporate guitar music into kind of the new sound?
I think we have to always go back to serving the song. And I think that if the song works best with a big guitar in some way, then that's what it is. If the song works best with less guitar or a smaller guitar, I think that's what it is. So there isn't one volume or one thing about this answer for the guitar. Did that answer your question? No?
I think.
That's funny. He's honest.
No. I think there's a difference between building what sounds like building a track and then singing on it, or having a song and then playing to it. And I've noticed a lot from doing writing sessions where there's one person like building a track while you're writing on acoustic guitar. And sometimes it can be amazing. Don't get me wrong. I've done songs where somebody's sitting on headphones, they're paying a bit of attention, like 6 4 1 5 2 4, okay, cool, and they're building a song. And then you come and sing. You upload the tracks, into your DAW, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. But a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, it then dictates everything, and it's so genre specific with like real hard hitting EDM. That's great, but it's the same problem as real hard hitting metal. You get real hard hitting metal, it does sound like a track that somebody is trying to squeeze some vocals in, and that's where you get that really heavy concussive rock. And it's a sound and it's a genre, but I think it's back to that same thing we were talking about earlier. It's up to us to change that. We have to, if you want to write something that has more of a Fleetwood Mac, it's a bam 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 bam, then write it. Then write the guitar track. Write the riff that's that hooky that somebody doesn't feel like they need to fill up with so much space. It's really up to us. Or, it's very easy for any of us to be like, the music industry, but I think we are the music industry. Everybody in this room, we are the music industry. I've worked at labels. Shelly's ran labels. I'm telling you, it's not what you think it is. Most of the time, they're pretty much like, okay. They will put up fights on stuff about this mixer or that famous guy has to do it or this famous person. But the reality is like it is still very artist driven. Artists are more likely to be self-destructive than anything else. They're more they can be unbelievably creative, and then they can also worry about what other people think and restrict themselves. So our jobs as producers and engineers and co-writers and stuff is to bring out the best of them. So we're the industry. You know what I mean? You're in it. You're all sitting here at AES. You are the music industry. You have the ability to go and motivate and inspire creativity in others, and that's a big part of what we do here. It's like there is no like echelon of like gatekeepers anymore. Not that there ever really was.
I think it's cyclical. I think one of the answers to his question is it's cyclical. It will come around again. Guitars will be maybe more like what you'd like to hear. You just have to be patient. Or you could write a song that's just fabulous, and everyone will accept that guitar sound, that guitar level, that guitar feel. Really all it takes, is one song can change everything. I think
the song. I know that's really obvious, but when Lord came out with Royals, there's no way you would have expected that to be a quote unquote hit. There was nothing about it that sounded like that on the radio. And it completely opened it up. Now, Billie Eilish can now be massively successful. There's so many things that can be, quote unquote left of center, and not just because if something is really good, it's really good. And it's always been that way. And I think almost all of us are guilty of this, is that we always make an excuse. You know, people come to me all the time and say, oh, you know, I've written a song for this artist you're working with. And I'm like, well, how am I going to give it to them? And I'm like, is it a smash hit number one? They're like, no, but it's as good as anything on their album. It's like, it's, you know what I mean? Why would they want to cover your song just because it's another third, fourth track on an album? We've got to set the bar high. We've got to do great things, you know. And I do agree. I think there's songs every now and then where you're like, wow, what a really cool guitar riff, and it's driving the song. There just needs to be more of those. I think if the song is amazing and it's got an awesome guitar riff in it, you know, it's going to stand out and guitar music has a chance. But, you know, all of the great bands did it, you know. Everybody knows, that follow me, and I'm a huge Queen fan. Well, you know, they wrote Another One Bites the Dust. You know, so they did disco when they were a rock band. They did Crazy Little Thing Called Love, which was a 50s song. Some people in America, when it came out, thought it was an Elvis cover. They would play shows and people were like, so which, I don't remember, did Elvis do that? You know what I mean? So you get the point. It's like, that wasn't the hip genre in 1980. There was no 50s songs on the radio in the top 40. But you wrote a song that was good enough to be on the radio. It went against the trend. It can always happen. It will always happen, no matter what's there. Any other questions for Shelly? Because I'm talking too much as usual.
Monitoring back in the day, you know, obviously, you know, we've had technological advances, and they still keep on, you know, moving up. Did you know, what were your monitors of choice? Did you have to, like, compensate, you know, for any lack of accuracies or anything of the sort?
You know, I started out in the studio where I worked at Record Plant. Well, I was actually at A&R in New York for many years. And I worked basically in one room. And then I went to Record Plant in New York, and I worked basically in one room. And then when I started to freelance, I had to bring some things with me that helped me understand the new studio I was going to be in. One of them was a pair of speakers, but they were little cubes called RORs. They're like Oratones. And I had that, and I brought a power amp with me, and then I realized the center section of the console could change it more than any power amp. But pardon me, I had that combination of those speakers and a clock radio that was mono. And I would figure out the mains in the studio I was working in, because from one studio to the other, they're drastically different. Everyone says their monitors are flat. I don't know what that means, because every piece of music I played in there was like, wow, what am I hearing? So it was basically a very simple approach to be able to give the client what he or she was coming to me for.
Any other questions? Oh, and I think there's a couple of people down the front there. Okay.
How you doing, guys? Based on your experience, what was the like initial steps in you know, for a solo artist specifically, in creating like a hit record? Like, what were the initial steps that they took that you saw, and then it started producing and growing into like a massive record?
Well, it's, you know, in real estate, it's the location. In our business, it's the song. And I've worked on songs that were, the record label thought it was a hit, the radio stations thought it was a hit, and it turned out to be a turntable hit, which means they played it, but no one bought it. So it really comes down to, does the song reach the listener, and does it reach millions of listeners? And if you have that song, which is hard to know in the beginning because everyone believes they do, but it starts with being true to that song when you take it from the writer and you produce it. Because the writer has been carrying it around, they don't want it changed, the producer wants it changed. There's a lot of discussion about the presentation of the song, and the mixing of the song can change everything, even if you have to write everything before the mix. So it's really a hard question to answer, but once a song starts to take off, believe me, the record label drives that song home like you've never seen before. They get a smell of like that this thing could travel. And I've done a lot of consulting for startup labels, and I had to get an answer for my client. I had to call a promotion guy for a big label, and I asked him, "What do you spend on promotion?" And they said they have to spend $350,000 at radio just to see if the song is going to do better, and if it does better, they'll spend another $200,000 and try to get it on radio, try to advertise, try to get it out there. But the first $300,000 would be a loss, and everyone's believing that it's going to do well, and some do and some don't. There's a lot of vagary with it.
What isn't it? Art Teller. What was his quote? Spend $1 million to make $1 million. Yeah, it's crazy with that world. I think what's interesting about that question is I worked with this girl singer, and we got her signed to RCA. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. So we got this girl signed to RCA, and she brings me this song that she's working on, and she says, "My label thinks this is a hit." And so she plays me the song, that, with the vocal that she cut with the producer, and I was like, it's a good song. I like the melody. Yeah, it's cool. The lyrics pretty cool. And she's like, "Yeah, but there's just something not right." And I'm like, well, can I hear the demo? And she's like, "Oh, here's the demo." And it's got Cara DeGuardi singing on it. And she plays me the song. And I'm like, oh, it's a hit. So to sort of like go to a point that I think you're alluding to is like, you can have a really good song, but if the singer can't sell it, it doesn't work. There's very, very few songs that you can sing, you know what I mean, or you can average. There's just some people that have a voice that can bring a really good song and make it an absolutely amazing song because they have the charisma. And somebody was talking about Bowie earlier. I mean, that was one of his amazing strengths, is that he's so charismatic.
That's that group Cutting Crew, I Died in Your Arms Tonight. So I get a call from Virgin Records, the head of Virgin Records, and he says to me, "I have a group, and I'd like to send you," at that time it was cassettes, "I'd like to send you a cassette of a song that's a big hit in England, and I'd like you to remix it for the U.S." And I said to him, "Well, you know that once you get that hit mix, you're not getting another hit mix. You'll get a different version of it, but it's not going to be that hit mix." And he said, "This mix is a hit for England, but it won't be a hit for the U.S. Let me send it to you and take a listen." And the song was mixed like an R&B song with the drums and bass and vocal up front and everything else behind, layered. But it was mixed like an R&B song. And it felt amazing. And I said, "Okay, I'll take it on. Let me give this a shot." And it was very tough to equal or beat their feel, but we got what you heard on the radio, which was totally different. But I understood what he was saying, and it was the first time I ever experienced that, where a song with that mix would not have been a hit in the U.S. It just wouldn't, no matter how strong the melody is. So it's really about the presentation. How do you know if you have the right presentation? Play it for some people that you trust and see what their reaction is. And people that will tell you the truth. And even the big dogs, they play stuff for other people, even from other labels that they trust, and say, "What do you think?" Just so they can keep their perspective, I want to embarrass somebody in the audience. There's a guy sitting here, his name is Pete Dell. He's a great mastering engineer.
Pete.
An awesome mastering engineer. This guy makes sounds. He saved my ass.
Hey, Pete. So we have a 2-minute warning. So do we have burning desires, questions?
We have so much information to pass on. Quick.
See if we can. There's another person. See if we can get like a couple of 1-minute questions. We'll try it.
Hey, so I had a quick question. you, as a seasoned vet, have seen artists who are probably more collaborative than others. Where do you see more success? Where you feel like you're really part of the team and contributing, or where the artist is more of like, this is my idea and I want it done my way?
Do you want to answer that?
No, I think that's a perfect one for you. It's a great question because he's really saying, I suppose he's saying is there just some artists that are so driven and have such a vision that you're just there to make sure that you don't mess it up. You know what I mean?
Try this. I'll give this a try.
Please.
So I've worked with producers that are like a fifth member of the group. I've worked with producers that were just a sounding board for the group. You try to put somebody who's a fifth member producer with a group that just needs a sounding board, you're going to have a fist fight. So it really has to do with the match of the producer and the group. Sometimes the producer saying very little because he knows the group has the right direction is absolutely the way to go. A smart producer knows when to zip it and let the group go for it, and is not threatened that the group is going to come up with the idea for this record. And so that's what I've seen. I've seen both sides of. I've seen the fifth member of the band, the producer be the fifth member of the band because the group needs that, and the group needs this total input where every part is discussed and the producer tells them what to play. You try doing that with Mark Knopfler, it's not going to go well. Mark Knopfler just needed somebody to be a mirror and bounce stuff off of. Okay, to the next question.
No, it's great. That's the outliers one, isn't it? There's the lesson there. It's like I agree. As an engineer, I met producers that have one skill set, and it may or may not work. And then I worked with guys when I was engineering that could be that. Guys and girls that could be. This is where I step in and completely tell you have to completely rewrite the song, and then other times they just sit there and help it happen. And that's rare. But again, it's an outliers thing. It's like understanding, looking at all these different successful people and finding out why they were successful, and then trying to figure out how you can incorporate all of those elements.
Well, good question, I guess. Thanks for taking our questions. Question I had is, have you ever worked on a song that was inspired or enhanced by a piece of new gear, like a synth or something like that?
I worked on a song for the Raspberries, a song called Go All the Way. And we mixed that song, and it just laid there. They had trouble playing it, but they were a good band, really great band, but they had trouble playing this song. And the producer said, I don't even know if I can put this on the album. Producer said, I don't even know if we can put this on the album. And I said, listen, we got this piece of gear. We just got it from Roger Meyer. It's a limiter compressor. We call it Oscar Mayer because you put music in one side, you get hot dogs out the other. It's so violent that maybe we'll work on this mix. And it worked. And the release time happened to be exactly the release time, happened to be the tempo of the song. And it started to pump. And it started, if you guys try to listen to the original, because the copies online are terrible. But it started to pump. As a matter of fact, it was a finished mix we put through it, and it had a fade. I didn't realize how much I was limiting this when I put the mix into this limiter. But there was no fade. The fade was up at 0. The meters looked like tone, but yet it had dynamics. And then I tried to buy the limiter, but the owner of the studio had sent it back because no one could use it because it was too violent. Roger Meyer says, there's some pieces on my desk. Roger, I'll pay for it. Can't you put it back together? I don't know what I did. I just kept screwing with it to give it to Roy Cicala, who's my mentor and a fabulous guy. And he said I gave it to Roy, and Roy hated it because no one could use it. I said, are you serious? The producer just told me this song went from not being on the album to being a top 5 record, all because of a piece of equipment. We also used a similar thing on Desire for You too. That was kind of like, they played it well, but it just wasn't working. We put it through a similar limiter compressor and made it pump and made it really go crazy. And if you listen to Desire, you'll hear those tom-toms just pounding away. And so sometimes we can make a difference with technology.
I want to see if we can get this one last burning desire.
Thank you very much. Big fan of you two guys, and a very informative session. I learn a lot. So my question is that, for example, for when the big studios or bigger senior mixer or engineers want to hire junior staff or a new mixer, new kid on the block. So what kind of technical skills you look for? Do you look for example, like a big work portfolio or a certain degree or a certain formal education, a bachelor or an associate degree or something like that? Or is that very helpful or not?
Can I answer it in one word that he's going to agree with? Attitude. End of story. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Just come in and just be like somebody that I could work with this guy. Your resume could be amazing, but if you come in like, it's actually sometimes can be a little bit of a, like, oh, this guy thinks he knows it all, comes in and goes, what's up? Like, no. Come in and be like, how can I be of service,
With a smile.
Yeah, with a smile. It's really, you just want to know. My wife and I talk about this all the time. Okay, there are, in LA, 100,000 people applying for the same job at all times. You choose the person you want to work with.
Right. No matter what education, no matter what they have.
Yeah. That's the number one answer to that, just the attitude. There's an educator over there. There's lots of educators like, Stucker, what's the number one thing you need in the studio? A good attitude. That's it. That's it. When you're stressed out, like he was saying, working with Phil Spector. Can you imagine working with Phil Spector on a John Lennon record? Can you even imagine what that would be like? You've heard the stories of him shooting out glass. I mean, those crazy things are true. Ask Jack. I don't know how. Shelly's probably a little bit more tactful, but Jack doesn't mind telling the stories. Those things are true. There's crazy things are true. Imagine that kind of situation, and then you've got an assistant who's contributing some drama. I mean, give me a break. You know what I mean? But that's the thing. I've had people be in there like, we got a problem. I'm like, no, we don't. Yeah, we do. The cable. And like, and no, we don't. We have no problems. Yeah, there's a problem. Suddenly, the artist's like, what's the matter? What's the matter? Like, it's okay. No. Your assistant just said there's a problem.
Oh yeah, I know that well.
You mean your former assistant?
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, a degree in psychology doesn't hurt either.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry this time has come to an end. We could easily do a couple of hours with you guys. This has just been fantastic. The amazing Warren Huart and the legendary Shelly Yakus. Let's hear it for him. Thank you so much.